Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Through the Fire. I am your host, Ryan Wickline, and today we are joined by a very special guest. He is a performance coach, entrepreneur, and author, Mr. Eric Mitchell. How you doing today, Eric?
I'm doing great. It's great to be able to get out and talk to people about what we do as motivators and as educators and as coaches. No matter if it's the youngest kids in the world or the oldest people around us, I think everybody can use a coach, no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, that's for sure. So the number one question the audience is probably wondering right now, who is Eric Mitchell?
Wow. Okay, so that's quite an interesting story. I'm a soon-to-be 58-year-old father of a 16-year-old. I've been a performance coach for the last 30 years. Did not originally go to school for that. Was going to school as for military history and international relations. Wanted to be a Marine Corps lawyer. That got derailed late 1980s, early 90s, and decided, hey, I played multiple sports in college. I want to get involved in coaching and training. I actually, Ryan, I broke into the Nautilus world in the early 90s. It was the super slow to failure phase. And I was around some of the most pioneering people in the industry. And this is what basically what it's what I did for a living. I would count. I'd stand there in suburban Philadelphia and go 1, 2, 3, great job, 4, 5, 6. And I made a decision probably about 1996. I just did not want to be coaching adults in the strength training world anymore. And I had a very good friend who connected me with a tennis pro in the Philadelphia area. And I've been pretty blessed. I went from literally training people, mainline Philadelphia housewives and their husbands and some of their kids, to training professional tennis players within about a week. And
Wow.
yeah, it was remarkable. And I really didn't have any basis of training except for what I'd learned myself playing sports in college. And so if we think about sports performance was in its infancy basically in the late 90s and early 2000s, nobody was really doing it. The old adage was either you're fast or you're not fast. And that's what people thought. I was pretty blessed. I was pretty fast. I was a 100, 200-meter sprinter, and I was very luckily got some genetic stuff from my parents. But broke into the sports performance world, was approached in 2005 by Bill Parisi, who owns Parisi Speed School Systems, and bought a Parisi Speed School in 2005 and hadn't looked back. Had been coaching for many years, both kids and adults in the Parisi Speed School world, and then training for Warriors, which was originally for martial arts fighters, but then morphed into adult fitness. Almost think of it like the metabolic training, like what CrossFit did, but a little different, really focused on culture. Was heavily involved in fundraising, Ryan. We can certainly talk about that at some point. And then, I had a life changing event happen in January of this year. And from there, from that event, and I can be open and honest with it, had a relationship crisis with my girlfriend, Karen. Came out of that. Everybody in the audience know we're back together. And as a result of that, wrote a book and decided to create a new coaching venture called the Tsunami Effect Coaching. And the idea behind that was to figure out, can people see ripples of their fear and anxiety, frustration and depression before they become destructive tsunamis hitting their own shoreline, their subconscious and conscious mind. But ultimately, if you're going to ask me what I am, I'm a coach. And so my job is to serve others to make them better. And that literally is what I'm here for. And it doesn't matter what level, like I said, from the 7-year-olds that I've trained all the way up to professional athletes to adults that are just struggling with their own lives. And by the way, and I'm sure you know this as a coach yourself, I get a tremendous amount of satisfaction and growth when I'm coaching, and it helps me as
Yeah.
well. So that's me in a nutshell. There's certainly a lot more to talk about, but we don't want to be here all night.
Yeah. You gave us a lot to unpack there, man.
For sure.
Man, like you just talking about like working with kids. I mean, not everybody can do that.
It,
I know that for a fact. I mean, I from doing it myself, and my friends are like, "Man, I don't know how you work with kids. I need to work with adults." I mean, I truly think working with kids is a calling.
Agreed. 100% calling. There's no doubt. It does take a special individual, and that's why it's really hard to find people when you're deciding and looking at it and going, okay, it's a younger man's game now, younger woman's game now. It's hard to find those people now in our industry that can take the mantle over for what the for and like, just like for instance you and I, what our expectations would be of others to take over. It's
Yeah.
hard to do. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, because this takes a lot of time and effort and energy to do.
it does.
So you talked about you were a college athlete. What sports did you compete in?
Football and track.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where'd you go to school at?
Juniata College, Central
Nice.
Pennsylvania. Yeah,
Nice. What type of preparation and mindset did it take for you to compete at that level?
interesting. I think that for me back then, so this is the 80s, it was more about the fact that I was just fiercely competitive myself. And my entire makeup was built around I would not allow myself to not succeed in what I wanted to do. And I think the preparation, remember, we were just talking about sports performance. No one did sports performance in the 1980s. I always say this, there were three teams in the NFL that did anything that was codified. That was the Raiders, the Steelers, and the Cowboys. That's it in the 1970s. They did strength training programs, they ran on their own. So I think mentally it was just a matter of I had to be galvanized with myself to make sure that I was training all the aspects what I needed, strength, speed, and power on my own, because we didn't have a strength and conditioning coach back then. And well, I always laugh. Interestingly enough, they hired one the year after I graduated, and then built a brand new weight room. So it's a different world now. Being in the sports performance world, where you have people like me, and people in the sports performance industry, whether it be Parisi or another company that trains people, where all of a sudden now you have the resources and the tools to make athletes better. We didn't have that. If you were, my parents would have laughed in my face if I said I want to go to a performance school to go learn how to run. They'd be like, "You're already fast. Go run." And so, so it's interesting. Parents are paying all this money for not only their kids to play a sport, but also to strength train and speed train. How many kids? It is amazing. I have a baseball kid right now. Has a hitting coach. He has a pitching coach. He has a fielding coach, like, and then he works with me, and I'm thinking to myself, does this kid have time to play baseball? Like, it's remarkable how that works. But so, yeah, if you're asking me how I prepared, I think it was just a mental toughness that I had that was bred from my parents.
Yeah, I think that's back in the day. That's what got you to that next level. Was more who was a tougher person.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I was undersized, so I had to be tough.
Yeah. So you talked about becoming a sports performance coach.
Mhm.
What led you to just leave everything behind and say, "Hey, I'm going to dive in and go this career route"?
Well, I got a great story behind that. So when I first started, and so you're thinking, and I paralleled, it's interesting, very good friend of mine and mentor of mine, Bill Parisi, who started Parisi Speed School. We paralleled each other in our development of this. When I, back in about 1999, I'm sorry, let me track back a little bit further. 1997, I approached the sports editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper, gentleman named Art Carey, and I said, "Hey, you want to write an article about my company on sports performance?" And he said to me, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, it's teaching athletes to be faster." And there was a pause, and he said, "Oh, Eric," he goes, "I'm not going to write an article about a company that does that because you can't make people faster." He goes, "Now, if you had like some advice about how to get marathon runners to run more effectively, yeah, I'll entertain that idea." So I didn't think anything of it, but something really cool happened, Ryan, right around March of 90 or February of 97 was the NFL Combine was on ESPN for the first time ever. And if you think about it nowadays, it's like it's a show. Like people are
Yeah.
going to be buying tickets to go see it now. But back then there was one or two reporters that were there. Like I think Chris Berman was one of the guys that was there. And I got a phone call a month later from Art Carey. So here I am. I'm driving in my white Chevy Blazer. I always make this joke because Bill Parisi was driving around in the white van filled with equipment in North Jersey. I'm driving a Chevy Blazer with equipment, driving around to train athletes. And he called me on my old Motorola cell phone, the ones you had to flip
Yeah.
and pull the wire. And he said, "Hey, I want to write an article about your company. Meet me at Haverford College, which is a small liberal arts school outside of Philly, in 45 minutes. And I'll do an article about your company." And I hung up the phone and I thought to myself, Ryan, I don't have a company. So I made it up on the way. I made up a company called Progressive Speed Training. And he wrote the article. And don't you know it? 48 hours later, I had over 70 phone calls on my
Volume. Your volume. Volume. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
excellent. So I had Art Carey from the Philadelphia Inquirer contacted me after the NFL Combine in 1997, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to do an article about your company. Uh, Meet me at Haverford College, which is, like I said, is a small school outside of Philadelphia." And he interviewed me for a company that I didn't have a name for until I got there and decided and made up a name called Progressive Speed Training. Right after that article came out, Ryan, I mean, within 48 hours, I had over 70 phone calls, both on the cell phone and my home line, of parents asking, "How do you get my kid faster? How do you get my kid faster?" And it just exploded from there. And all of a sudden, I was down in Florida working with professional tennis players. I had an NFL agent contacting me about getting his guys ready for the NFL Combine, and it was a remarkable experience. And again, this was back when I actually had to contact the NFL to get a videotape, yeah, one that you plug in, a videotape on the combine drills, and had to train the 5-10-5 and the 40-yard dash and all that. And you'd think to yourself, well, that's pretty practical stuff. Like, why would it take somebody to help somebody get there? The reason being is these guys were not preparing for those things, just like the tennis players were not preparing for those things. They were preparing to play their sport, and there was nobody working on performance. Well, had another article in the Philadelphia Magazine printed about how to increase speed for tennis players. And from that, that's when Bill Parisi contacted me in '05 and said, "Hey, look, we're going to franchise Parisi Speed Schools." I had no idea what it was. I went on a discovery day up in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, and I was able to now build something that's I'm still involved in. I'm a senior master coach for Parisi, so I get to go all over the country, and actually, we get to go over the world and coach coaches on how to get kids to be faster. But here's what it's interesting: you're a mindset coach. Everything we do is built around mindset. So if you ask me what's the biggest crisis in this country, and a lot of people would say, "Oh, it's obesity, it's heart disease, it's this." No, it's lack of confidence.
Yeah.
And
That's
that,
what I see.
yep,
Almost all kids, they lack confidence.
they do. They do. Even the really talented ones, because everything is built on measurables now. There's no avenue for any mistakes to be made. And in our job, I think what I tell these kids is, I want you to make mistakes. You're supposed to make mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, you're not working the way you're supposed to.
Yeah.
And so I find that, it's a shame. It's very disturbing that you've got a generation of kids that are so down on themselves and do not believe in themselves. Um, yeah, it's saddening actually to see that.
Yeah. It's funny you should say that because, like, when I take on new clients, the first place I start them out at is confidence. That's the first area. And everybody's like, well, why do we start here? I was like, because I know how hard it is to achieve something big.
Sure.
And if I don't get you to start believing you can do it, you'll quit the first, like, the first moment you face that adversity.
Yeah, it's funny when we have our combine groups come in. So these guys, Division 1, 2, and 3, preparing for their pro day, or some of the ones that are invited to the combine. It's the first question we have for them: Do you believe you can do this? And you'd be surprised when you have some people who are like, "Yeah, I think so," and you're going, "You think so? You have to know so." You have to know so. And by the way, you'll know the guys and the women also that are, gearing up for college sports, or even those kids that are going from middle school to high school. you'll recognize the kids that have great confidence, and then you're going to see the kids that are really doubtful of themselves, no matter how talented they are.
Yeah.
And that's our job as coaches. How do we build them up and make them feel good because of the tremendous pressures that are going on in the world around them? The static from social media and from their environments is so overwhelming. Listen, Ryan, I don't know how old you are, but I'm closer to 60 than 50, and we just did not have the amount of static and the pressure that these kids have today.
Yeah.
We just don't have it. Yeah.
Yeah. It was more competing for fun and because you
Mhm.
love the sport. Now it's like this is their make or break for everything.
It's true. And then it affects everything. Like their entire psyche is built around, like if you have kids nowadays that get injured, you'll have a kid who plays basketball. And it was interesting, we have a really talented basketball player that we train, and she's 6'3" and everything, and she had a knee injury, not a serious injury, but you could see it completely deflated her because she associated herself as a basketball player. That's what she felt. But what am I going to do? I'm a basketball player. It's like, well, you're not. You're a 17-year-old kid. I mean, you play basketball, and that's the hard part for us to kind of bridge that gap. How do you make them feel okay about that? You're going to have setbacks. It's going to be tough sometimes, and so that, I think, that's part of our job.
Yeah.
That mindset piece.
Yeah. It's definitely an overlooked piece to coaching.
Mhm. I think it's an art of coaching that a lot of coaches don't understand.
No. Like I know with a lot of coaches, when I went and talked to them first one, what I was doing around my area, they looked at me like I was crazy. Like, what's this?
Yeah,
It's like, well, I could see it in just a lot of kids by the way I talked to them. Like, as we were getting ready to go compete, that they were lacking confidence. When we'd go show up to go compete, they were like, well, I don't know if I can do well here. I'm like, why can't you? It's like, this is the same tournaments I used to wrestle at. I was like, and did really well, and you guys are just as good as I was.
yeah. I don't think that these kids understand it. And like I said, I think it's the pressure of, they have a lot of pressure from their parents. This club mentality has gotten to be really tough on these kids nowadays. So you have these parents putting out a tremendous amount of money for these kids to compete. And listen, youth sports is a machine now.
Yeah.
And boy, if we take it a step further, think about what's happening at the collegiate level. I mean, I have an athlete who transferred to play field hockey from one school to another because the school's paying her more money than she could possibly imagine, and it's all from an NIL deal. And we wouldn't even couldn't even imagine that in our time and stuff like that. No, it's like, and that's, but there you go. There's another piece of pressure that these kids are under. How do I get that? How do I play? And it's really amazing. We'll tell parents, I'll tell them, they said, only 7% of all high school kids go on to play collegiately at any level. And then the level of that high school, of that college experience, drops dramatically as you go up in divisions. And some parents are like, no, that's not possible. That can't be right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, and actually 75% of all kids drop out of sports by 14. So that, it's a scary stat, even though more kids play sports than ever before.
Yeah.
More kids play sports. It's a generation of kids who will be less likely to outlive their parents. So that's kind of a scary stat.
Yeah, it is. What's probably the number one trait you look for in an athlete to see if they're going to be successful or not?
Well, we said beliefs are a really important piece of this. Character is a big piece of this as well. The ability to be humble and to know that, like I said, it's okay to make mistakes, but also realize being of high character is really important. An athlete that understands community and culture is really important. That's not just about them. It's not just about it's not just about who they're what their next goal is going to be, the next basket they get, the next touchdown they score. Are they able to communicate and work with other kids? Because they're going to have to work with other kids, and then subsequently they're going to have to work with their peers. They're going to have to work with their siblings. They're going to have to work with people when they become in society with as coworkers. So I look for kids of high character, and now that's not to say every kid's going to roll in the door with that, but if we instill that culture and character in them, so we always say this before they walk in the door, Ryan. We do an evaluation before they walk into the facility, like the overall training facility. We evaluate them. Part of the evaluation is getting them to understand they got to do all the work. They got to do the work, and if they don't do the work, they're not going to get anything out of it. And so I think that's an important part of what it is. So I don't know if I always look for the most talented kid necessarily. I look for the kids that have tremendous heart and they got tremendous character.
Yeah. Heart's a big one.
Yep. Yeah.
What's the difference between the discipline and mindset in a high performing athlete and an average one?
Okay, so that's a great one. We just had this conversation with a bunch of baseball players yesterday. I said good athletes are going to do what they're supposed to do. They're told what to do, they'll do it. Great athletes will do more than anybody else is willing to do. So it's the athlete that's going to put more time and energy into their craft. So the high performing athlete, that does not mean they're the best athlete. What it means is they're going to put the time and energy into both physically and mentally into their sport. And if you look at what's the prime example, you look at a guy like Michael Jordan, putting the time in to do free throws, putting the time in to do his conditioning. Walter Payton was a great example for the younger audience. They might not know exactly who that was, but Walter Payton was a running back for the Chicago Bears. Was not the fastest guy, was not the tallest guy, but he always said, "I will be the first person to finish the first run in practice and the first person to finish the last run in practice," because he said, "I will never allow my opponent or my teammates to outwork me." So I think there is a difference between athletes who are willing to just do what they're supposed to do to get by and the athletes that just do more than they're expected to do. That's the difference right there.
Yeah, that's usually the one of the first things I kind of work on with kids too when they tell me their goals. I'm like, well, you're only doing the bare minimum. You're doing what the coach tells you to do,
Yeah,
and you're expecting to jump these levels when everybody's doing that. How are you supposed to catch the people ahead of you?
it's true. Yeah, definitely true.
How would you go about getting them to develop more discipline and upgrade their mindset?
Consistency is a big piece of this. So being open and honest, first of all, about what they're out to do and why they're here. So I do this at the end of every evaluation. I ask every kid, and again, I'll even ask the older athletes this. We'll sit down and say, "Who brings you here?" And they'll all point at their parents. "Who pays for it?" And point at their parents, and they'll say, "Who has to do all the work?" I've had some kids that'll go, "My parents." I'm like, they don't catch on to the whole point. Once they recognize that the work falls on them and that they're not at a gym, they're not just working out, they're training, because working out is something you do as an activity. Training is something that you do to set the stage for greatness in the future. Whether you succeed or fail, which you will fail sometimes, and you can fail forward, and that's an important part of what we tell them, but they have to recognize that they have to do the work. They have to instill in themselves a discipline. We talk about the difference between discipline and self-discipline. Discipline is when their parents are telling them what to do: take out the trash, walk the dog, do this. Self discipline is, even at the very bare minimum, teaching them to decelerate and stop exactly what they're supposed to decelerate and stop is a form of self discipline. Do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it without anybody having to tell you that you have to do it. And so I'm a really firm believer in getting them to understand in the early stages of training that it falls on them to be disciplined for themselves, because they will be better leaders in their community. They're going to be better siblings to their family, better kids to their parents. They're going to be better teammates across the board. And believe me, Ryan, it bleeds into what they're like as adults. And if I see productive adults, and by the way, this is the great thing about being in this business with such longevity, is I'll get reports back from kids who are now state police officers, kids that are lawyers, they're doctors, they're accountants, they're steel workers, they're all these different things, who said that it was our coaching and my coaches and me that helped them develop the skill sets and discipline to be where they are today. And if they're bringing their kids to us, we know we've been successful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. You wrote your book, The Tsunami Effect. Can you tell us what it's about?
Yeah. So what you're looking at with the tsunami effect is this. It was, can you look at in your life and see out to sea? Think of a tsunami like this. Most of the time, it's created by an underwater disturbance. There's some anomalies, there's some volcanoes or underwater landslides, but it creates this disturbance. And what it does is you've got waves that propagate out from the center of that disturbance. They're unrecognizable, undiscernible when they first start. They're small ripples. But as they approach the shore and they slow down their trajectory and they're in more shallow water, that water starts to pile up on itself and becomes very, very destructive. And so it's not just one wave, it's many waves that come in a tsunami. So people just think they think of wind driven waves that crest and fall. That's not what a tsunami does. It's just this boiling amount of energy that is quite destructive. What I've equated it to is your shoreline is your subconscious and conscious mind. If you don't recognize those pillars, those ripples with fear, anxiety, frustration, and depression, they will absolutely crash ashore and destroy your relationships. It's going to destroy your health and then ultimately your career. And career is third. Because if you don't have your health and you don't have your relationships, you're in deep, deep trouble. And now, if you've been hit by tsunamis, which believe me, I'm sure you and I can sit here and say we both have, is that can you build the citadels to protect yourself from those? And I wrote this book in response to a tsunami I went through. That's not to say it's the first one I've ever gone through. I've been around on this earth a little too long to not have more than one. But what it did for me was it galvanized me into believing, okay, I know I can help more people. I know I can help more people recognize and see these ripples before they become so destructive. And once it happens, how to protect themselves from it. So the book essentially is a series of chapters about some of my experiences. Then it has a workbook piece to it so that you can work on it. And then also it's got a story at the end of every chapter because storytelling is so important for coaches and how to relate it back and make it more relatable to people. And most of the stories are about overcoming adversity, but also belief. Like, do you have hope and do you believe and do you have faith? And that's a really important piece of why I wrote the Tsunami Effect. And the response has been pretty overwhelming. I'm pretty blessed to say I'm an Amazon bestseller, so I'm very happy about that. And but that's irrelevant because what's relevant is it going to help people? And I've gotten pretty emotional responses from people in and out of my circle about the Tsunami Effect.
Awesome. Why did you choose that title?
Well, I'm fascinated by a lot of different things. I'm a studier of history, and I'll tell you exactly why. The day before I decided to write it, I watched a show about the Boxer tsunami of 2004 in Indonesia, and it was on National Nat Geo. And it was, if people don't realize how destructive that was, it killed over 250,000 people. And there was no early warning system in the Indian Ocean for whatever reason. It's in the Pacific. There's a lot in the Pacific and in the Caribbean. But in the Indian Ocean there wasn't one, and people had very little warning to see what was going on. And even the people that saw it were just sitting there in awe, staring at it. There's a famous clip of a man. They're filming him from the top of a hotel, and he's just standing on the beach as the tsunami's coming in, and he's engulfed by it, and no chance of survival, none, absolutely none, pulverized probably by the tsunami itself. And then I looked at it and said, wow, that's a great kind of an analogy to the way people's emotions are and what happens when we don't pay attention to what's going on around us. I want to make a little caveat in here. Like during the depression chapter, I wrote that if someone has really serious mental health issues, they need to contact a professional. I'm a coach, and I can certainly help people, but my role is not as a professional to counsel people in that regard. So there's
Yeah.
in the book itself. But listen, I went through my own emotional crisis and was able to come out from it and was able to be more galvanized, and it really motivated me to write a book. And what I didn't know about this is that only 1% of the population writes books. People want to write, but they don't. I was very blessed. I found a tremendous editing team that helped me through this, and it was really great. Got it done very quickly, and yeah, it was a perfect word for what I envisioned, what people needed to do in the face of a tsunami.
Yeah. Like you just even telling that story of how you got the name for it. I can just picture people just staring at their own
Yeah.
problems coming at them too, just like
Yes.
that, just like watching it come at you and just engulfing you.
Yeah, and what's really disturbing about it is that people don't realize the first wave actually is the least destructive one. What it does is it tears things apart, then it goes back, then it sucks back out to sea with railroad locomotives, trees, buildings, and then the second wave comes with all the debris. And that's when people are, the blunt force trauma hit, you have these tremendous casualties, not just from the water, but, and that's, again, you're hit by a tsunami emotionally, and then the debris hits you,
Yeah.
and that's why I said, like, health and relationships come first.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in my age bracket, especially, they don't pay attention to their health. They're more focused on their kids, which, by the way, then ties into what you and I were just talking about. They're so focused on their children that there's no time for themselves. I had somebody actually say to me, "I haven't trained in 20 years," and I said, "Why?" "Well, I have no time because of my kids." And I thought, "Well, you're not going to be around, though.
Yeah.
You're not
That
going to be
was
around."
that was one of the things I had to learn too was I can't help as many people as I need to unless I'm taking care of myself first.
It's true.
Because if not, you're giving everything to everybody else and your cup's running low.
Yeah, and empaths, who I think coaches are always empaths. We absorb tremendous amounts of energy from other people, and then then, for instance, like I said, you come home if you have a significant other, and you don't want to talk anymore, and the reason why is you're burned out. You don't want to talk
Yeah.
about anything. Well, that's a problem. That's a ripple right there where you're just ignoring your relationships, and then before you know it, your wife leaves, your husband leaves, your kids don't want to talk to you, and I, yeah, what's the career worth if you don't have that?
Yeah. What's one thing you hope your readers take away from reading your book?
Well, that's a great question. I think that the number one thing is to slow down, take a breath, pause, and be introspective about where you are. Really realize, not just feigning this whole thing about I'm a great multitasker, I can do anything, I work better under stress and pressure. That's just not true. We're not built for that. You are built to take care of you. You are built to take care of the people that are around you, and then ultimately, if you do those two things, your career is going to survive, not just survive but thrive. I want them to take away that they absolutely can learn. They can learn about themselves and have the ability to create that early warning system, that they can see those ripples and see the tsunamis coming. Or, like I said, if they're hit by one, they know exactly, instead of folding and breaking and cowering from it, how do they rebuild themselves in that terribly destructive event. So I want the readers to take away what you and I started talking about in the beginning. Do they believe in themselves? Can you believe in yourself? And that's an important aspect for me as to what they're looking for.
Yeah. What was probably your biggest challenge, you'd say, when you're writing it?
Overcoming my own emotions, diving into my father's alcoholism, overcoming, like, as a youth, how I dealt with that, my dad dying when I was 18 years old, how I overcame that, how I broke through the most traumatic relationship collapse I've ever had in my life. Yeah, I can say that at my age. How did I overcome that? It actually made writing the book was a cathartic moment for me. It, the hard and when someone asked, they were like, "Oh, it must have been really difficult to write it." I was like, "No, actually, that wasn't the hardest part. That was actually the easiest part. It was finally facing my own tsunamis of that, the 8-year-old kid whose parents got divorced, the 18-year-old kid who lost his dad, the angry person in his 20s who basically, glided through life with not a care in the world. And then all of a sudden at 50, 57, I was hit by a major tsunami. And by the way, if I hadn't written the book, well, actually, no, let me rephrase that. Had my girlfriend Karen not given me this ultimatum about myself, it wasn't about her, it was about me. If I hadn't gotten that, I wouldn't have. I don't know if I would have written the book. I don't know if I would have made those changes. And so she, it's the book's dedicated to her because she literally was the early warning system in the tsunami for me, and it's dedicated to her, the book,
Isn't
because
it
of.
crazy how you can just like how people can just push down all that pain and just glide through life, and then eventually it will eventually come at you if you don't deal with it.
Yeah, and I think what happens a lot of times is, and I luckily didn't turn to this, but easily could have turned to alcohol and drugs back in my youth, my 20s, and everything like that. I didn't. I went completely the opposite direction. I never touched the stuff, but. But I was angry all the time. Like, I was such,
Yeah.
I blinked. I got to tell you, like, I blinked and I was in my 30s. I blinked again, I was in my 40s. I blinked again, I was in my mid 50s. And I thought, what have you accomplished? Now, that's not to say I haven't accomplished anything. I know that I have. I know I've impacted a lot of people, but I couldn't sit back and enjoy it until this all happened in January of last year. Oh, no, this year, January of 2025. Yeah. So
How much of has your faith played a part in bringing you healing?
a tremendous amount. So I found faith actually in mid-February. I finally found faith in God and Jesus in mid-February, and had a big religious awakening, which actually helped me an awful lot. So that's been a big piece of this. How that's helped me and developed. I I don't see how. This is me. Not everybody has to have this big epiphany, but I don't see how I couldn't go any further without faith any longer. Like, how could I not have faith? It's the trust in that that's helped me do the things that I'm doing right now. Yeah, it's a slow process still, but it has a different feel. It's hard to explain it. Now that faith has become so integral into what I do. I pray each night, each morning, I journal, I prep, I do all those different things, and I feel like a different person as a result of that, which is pretty
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
So, how do you think that trauma and the pain led you to Jesus and your true purpose in life?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I think that we should not be suffering in pain. And I think that we're not we put ourselves through pain when we don't have faith, and unwarranted pain. Obviously, we're going to always have pain and some struggle, because we're sinners. So we're always striving to be better, obviously, but it's not an easy task. I would say for me, it's helped me navigate pain better. It's helped me have a belief that there's a different purpose now. It's definitely purpose driven, and it is God's purpose for me. It's not my decisions. There's a God is guiding me through this, and that's the wonderful piece of this, that you have this calmness about, even in the face, whether it be financial, whether it be emotional, um, having a son that's turning 16, that angst, all that stuff. But even that, like, there's a relaxed feel for it, because I know that I'm ultimately not the one making all the decisions any longer. And that's a great feeling.
Yeah. I can just say from my own experience that there's a lot more peace in the struggle because you know
Well said.
that this was ordained for you. Like, I've given you this struggle for a reason. So just go through it and I'll be with you.
I agree. And that's the cool thing. He's with us. And that's the great part of this, that I'm enjoying so much. And yeah, that's been like literally a revelation, if I can use that word.
What advice would you give someone who is in a dark place themselves and wanted to know if God was real?
I think first and foremost, we talked about it again, to have faith and belief that you're not the one that's operating the system. We sometimes fall into a trap of, especially somebody who's in a really dark place, of continuously think that they have to rely on themselves to pull themselves out of it. When the reality is, if you do have faith, it's going to help you navigate and see, if I can use the tsunami analogy, to see those ripples in your life that are affecting you, and have a belief in that. And by the way, talk to somebody who's of faith. Don't just talk to people who are not, because unfortunately, what they're going to do is, I think, reinforce the behavior you're in. Find someone who has faith, who's going to have an unbiased opinion of where you are, that just wants to hear what you have to say, and then give you some guidance as to what they experience. Because I don't care who you are, everybody's been through it.
Yeah.
Everybody's been through it. And the advice I would give them, number one, is, if it's a seriously dark place, then absolutely find some mental health counselor that's going to help you, and navigate that extreme piece of it. But if some of you is lacking a belief in faith or a belief in themselves, find somebody that is of faith, that can help you through it, because I did. And that really helped me a lot. I resisted it, not going to deny that, but I was ready. It was time.
Yeah, I think we all have that resistance there for a little bit because they're like, no, we can do this on our own. And you realize, what was I doing because I can't do this on my own?
Yeah, you can't. You can't. I learned it even just coaching. You can't do it yourself, you know?
Yeah. So you started doing some motivational speaking and everything too, didn't you?
Yes. Well, to be honest, I've been doing it for a long time. So everybody says, well, how do you feel so confident, comfortable up in front of big crowds? Well, for 4 straight years with the Parisi Speed School, we did orientations for parents and kids from 7:30 to 8:30 every Tuesday and Thursday night for 4 straight years. So I had to learn very quickly to address stoic parents who did not necessarily believe in sports performance and convince them that we're to entrust us with their most precious commodity, their kids. Well, that morphed into speaking at Parisi Speed School summits and then training for warrior summits, then doing fundraising. And I want to tell you a quick story. I went down for a Parisi certification in Virginia Beach at Waring's Gym, and they had just had that terrible shooting in the courthouse that had killed several people, and I didn't know that several of those people were members of Waring's Gym down there. It's a very famous gym in Virginia Beach, and they asked me, "Will you get up in front of we're doing a fundraiser? Get up and do a speech before the fundraiser?" And I had no idea that a woman was in the audience who had to crawl over her deceased friends to get to the SWAT team to get away from the mayhem that was going on. And I said, it was a no brainer. Absolutely, of course, I'm going to do this speech. And I did a whole story on a community and talked about the story of the starfish, how this little girl just after a big storm was saving these starfish and throwing these starfish back into the water. And this man came up to her and said, you need to stop doing this because you're not going to be able to save all of them. And she takes a deep breath. She picks up the starfish closest to the man's foot. She hurls it back into the ocean, and she says, "Well, I'm not going to save them all, but I saved that one. I'm going to save this one. I'm going to save this one. I'm going to save this one." And soon enough, everybody's throwing starfish back into the ocean, and all it took was just her selfless act to help a community. And I was able, that's like at the, be able to get up in front of people and do that because I've been given this platform, and I really believe, like I said, I've been gifted by God to do this. I do believe that, and to get up in front of people and help people ease their fears, and it's just been a passion of mine for so long, from helping work with athletes with special needs and speaking to them. We do story time around every single class. Even now, we do story time at the end, and you tell a story, and everybody goes, "Well, where do you find these stories?" I'm like, "On the internet. You find these stories like the stories of overcoming adversity." And yeah, so right now I'm in the beginning phases of getting contracts. I can't say yet the companies that are trying to bring me in because we're not there yet, but companies to bring me in and speak, and they're rather large companies to speak at these large summits that they have, and also to talk to their entire sales divisions. And that's what's springing from this. And as you can already tell, I love to talk, so it's an easy outlet for me to grow a new business.
That's awesome. What's probably the most rewarding part for you?
You know what? I tell you what, it's exactly what we said. If I can have people come up and say that it was life changing in a way for them to believe in themselves, like accolades are great. I've had people say like, "Oh, I can't believe you've done all this stuff. This is great." But when you actually have people reach back out to you, and I mean, Ryan, years later, 15, 16, 17 years later, and saying, "You have no idea the impact you had on me when I was 9 years old. You have no idea the impact you had on me when I was 15 and I was in a dark place as an athlete thinking I was worthless." And that, they're a successful person, a successful family person. That yeah, that's the most that's the greatest joy I get out of this. Not anything else other than that, knowing that I made some impact. So I always say this: what do I want my son to remember? I want my son to remember that I was a great dad and that I wanted to help other people. Yeah, that's the greatest part of this legacy that I want to be able to bring out.
Yeah, that's a great legacy.
Yeah. And I apologize, I got a little emotional just now. Yeah.
It's all right. So when are you going to be releasing your workbook to go along with your book?
Yeah, so the course, the funny thing is the book actually is a workbook. So within each chapter, there is a piece of it where you have to work on some different things throughout that. The 5 week course is actually it's up and running, but now what's going to happen is the workbook's going to be a part of it. Anybody that actually does my course gets the book. So they actually get this the tsunami effect. So they get the book, they get to go through the workbook part of the book itself. So I purposely did that. My editor said, Eric, make it a workbook. Make it a book where people can interact with the book itself, and then the 5 week course is a companion to the book itself. And then I'm already contemplating the next book, which is really wonderful.
What are
So
you thinking about then with that, with your
yeah,
next book?
that's going to be the journey of a father with his son, and how, especially me as a single father with full custody of my son, navigating relationships with your children. And it doesn't mean that a father of a daughter can't relate, but it definitely is the impact that a father has on his son. And for me, losing my dad when I was 18, having a great stepfather as well, who married my mom while my dad was still alive, and having great relationships in that regard. And believe me, the tsunami effect will tie into this book about fathers and sons, because you're teaching your children to be resilient now. And that's and by the way, I laugh about this. My son's school, a bunch of his friends all ordered the book. And they're all like reading the book. And I'm like, oh, this is some heavy stuff for 15 and 16-year-old kids. But you know what? Maybe they should read it. You
Yeah.
know, maybe they
I
should see it.
mean, yeah, because they need to, like, I think a lot of kids need to know how to deal with life a little bit more.
I'll agree with you. They're so sheltered.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then, like, some parents I've seen, like, they try to, well, I phrase this without maybe offending some people, but it's kind of like the helicopter parents,
No,
kind
it's
of
true.
step in the way so they don't have to face any struggle or adversity or any challenges to make sure they don't fail.
Well, I mean, there are helicopter parents. There are bulldozer parents too that just blast over everybody and try to dominate and push their kids. I mean, when you're training kids and their first instinct is to continuously look back at their parents, sometimes we don't want parents in the facility because I want the kids to feel comfortable and confident. And I'll ask the kid, "Do you want your parents here?" And some of the parents, I rarely have parents now that will say anything. They'll just be like, "Okay, well, yeah, we'll be back in an hour."
Yeah.
That's mostly what it is. So, now if you got a real cooperative parent, no problem, stay. Love for you to take a look at it, and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But yeah, I would say that's the legacy that I want to leave for sure.
Yeah. How can people get a hold of you?
I would say easiest way, social media is the best way. Instagram, Facebook. I mean, Instagram is at Coach Eric Mitchell. That's just pretty simple. Tsunami Effect website will be live in about 3 weeks. It's under construction. I'm on Facebook as well. I'd be shocked at how many people have contacted me through Facebook, and the reason why the algorithm is because a bunch of old people like me are on Facebook. So
And
it's
that's
like,
how we met. Like,
yeah,
I added you as a friend, and next thing you know,
yeah.
we're talking.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I love about it. And that's the connection. So I think social media, and honestly, if anybody wants to contact me, and this is a great thing, they private message me and I'm going to get back to them very quickly, because I want to engage people and talk to them. Whether they buy the book, whether they do the course or not, doesn't really matter in the end. Are they connecting, and how can I help them in any way? If I can, great. If they want to be a part of the tsunami effect, terrific. If they don't, what a great avenue to talk to people and build community.
Yeah. Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
Well, we've covered a lot, man. I mean, that's like, we've covered a lot. I would encourage this. I would say this, that the one thing that we have to remember as coaches, like coaches impact the lifetime of a person. When we talk about trainers impact the moment that people are working out. Coaches are our job. If you really look at the word coach, it's to get someone from one destination to a better destination. And that's really what coaching means. It means getting somebody one place that they were, whether it be, like you said, in a dark place, or just in a place where they just felt they weren't good enough necessarily. How do we get them better? And that's what I want to instill in all of your listeners, that, hey, look, coaches are here to make you better. And my job, my calling is to help people be better, as I'm sure you are as well.
Yeah. That's why I got into it, was like, hey, I went through these troubles in my life. I want to go help people to make sure to help these kids avoid that same path I went down and help them
I
become
agree.
better.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
Final question. What is one piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with about overcoming adversity?
Yeah, tackle it. Look head on into it. Don't be afraid of it. Don't turn and run. There's a great story in our training for warriors. It's called, where our tagline was "Into the Roar," and the reason why is when zoologists and biologists used to study prey animals in Africa, what would happen is female lions would form the phalanxes to squeeze animals into a ever smaller and narrowing pipe to catch them. Male lions would go about a mile up from those females, and the moment those animals knew instinctually that they were at a mile away, they would start to roar. Senior pride male and two subordinate males. Well, most of the time, what the prey animal would do is they would turn and take off and run in the opposite direction. And the moment they did that, that's when the females slammed the trap shut. What was observed was the prey animals that actually went through the phalanx of males survived. And the reason why is because they went into what they feared most. And I always tell people this: a male lion wants to kill someone or something, it's going to. But it's not its job to do that in the hunt. And so they don't really make many moves in that regard. I will tell people right now, go into what scares you the most. And if you do that and you don't run away from it, it's not going to catch you. You run, it's going to catch you. So for anybody out there, what you fear the most, I don't care if it is athletic, I don't care if it is financial, I don't care if it is academic, I don't care if it's relationship related, whether it's your relationship with yourself or others, don't run. Go into it.
Great advice right there. Great story to go with it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, Eric, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing your insight and wisdom with all of us.
Well, it's been an honor, man. I appreciate you.
Awesome. Well, guys, that's going to be all the time we have here today. Remember, the only way to get what you want is go through the fire.
Love it.